educators. I'm Elizabeth Larkam, delighted to be in conversation today with Judith Aston, who is the founder of Aston, the creator of Aston Kinetics, and the author of the handspring book, Aston Postural Assessment, a new paradigm for evaluating body patterns. This is the second edition of this book that was groundbreaking when it came out. Let's go over some slides now that explain what you can expect from this webinar and so that you can best participate with Judith Aston. Pausing for screen sharing from Hillary. Yes. So this is how things work. Judith Aston will be spotlighted during the presentation and the practice, given that she has not prepared not only lecture from specific selections of the book, but also she'll lead us in movement demonstrations and experiences. Today's webinar will comprise of 45 minutes in discussion and directed practice. And then at 15 minutes to the hour, we'll start with Judith taking your questions. We recommend that you have enough space for a movement practice, specifically that you have space around you so that you can take about 4 steps and appreciate to embody the material that Judith will teach. We welcome your questions and remind you that the questions are best submitted using the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen. Judith will answer as many questions as we have time for in the hour, and we're prepared to go 10 minutes after the hour to make sure that there's ample time for your questions. Just to remind you that the chat will be open during this webinar, so you're welcome to greet your friends and provide commentary. Just a couple of reminders that since the webinar is being recorded and also live streamed on YouTube, your chat comments will become part of the archive. So choose your words well. Also a reminder that the questions that Judith answers will only be taken from the Q&A, so don't get distracted by posing questions in the chat. And finally, we note a couple of more things, that this webinar is being live streamed on YouTube, which was available in the handspring link. And we have a disclaimer to remind you that this discussion is for informational and illustrative purposes only and is not meant to impart medical or therapeutic advice, that we refer attendees to Judith Aston's book, Aston Postural Assessment, for more information. Judith Aston, welcome to Move to Learn. Let me give a few sentences of introduction and read a bit from your book, and then we're in your hands and your vision, your eyes. Judith Aston, the creator of Aston Kinetics, has been a pioneer in encouraging movement therapists and body workers to look at the postural causes of movement problems rather than focusing treatment only on physical symptoms. Her acute ability to see the body in stillness and motion and to train others to see, move, and exercise established her discipline of bodywork and movement training that is known as Aston Kinetics. Rather than enforcing physical symmetry, the system seeks to recognize the asymmetries that are natural to a person's body and to achieve the best movement possible. Now, Judith has been collaborating, teaching, and leading the field of the intersection of manual therapy and movement therapy for 5 decades. So before many of you were born. I was fortunate to be introduced to Judith's work at St. Francis Memorial Hospital when she was invited to teach her movement system at the Center for Sports Medicine in San Francisco. Tom Myers, who's the author of Anatomy Trains, wrote one of the forewords for Judith's book. And this is a comment, a paragraph from his foreword. Mindfulness is a buzzword these days, and the first thing we need to be mindful of is our bodies. Its sensations, feelings, hunches, hidden pains, lost places, restrictions, and joys. A large part of how we assemble our moment by moment perception rests on the sensations formed through our kinesthetic sense. Judith is a master of bringing mindfulness to bear on the pattern of movement in the body. Can't wait, Judith. Take it away.
Oh, yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your interest. I'm just delighted to be here and so delighted that Handspring was interested in publishing this book so that I could pass along these ideas to all the people that work with bodies. You with your own body, and you as a teacher of somatic therapy or a body worker, whatever your category, or a sports coach, for example. So many times what happens is that the way we use our body shapes us. And unless people know about how to neutralize, over time, the body shows the consequence of that. So when the people who help us know how to see a body pattern, they can begin to problem solve and design movement programs, bodywork programs, exercises, the way you run, the way you climb mountains, etc., accordingly to your pattern, not to a system outside of your body pattern. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited about this book. So thank you so much. And nice to see you again, Elizabeth.
Yes.
I think you asked me if I would talk a little bit about the history.
Yes, Judith, since you have such a rich history of evolution in this field and pioneering the field, we're so curious to know what experiences led you to the development of Aston Kinetics.
Yes, it's been a lifelong process. And since you asked that the other day, Elizabeth, I was thinking, you know, as a child, I was interested in three things only. Dance, always dancing, math, because I had a certain skill, and figuring things out, trying to problem solve. So for example, I remember when I was 5 that people in my house would be throwing out a watch, or they would be throwing away a toy, and I'd say, could I have it? And my interest was to see if I could fix it. So I only remembered this a couple of days ago when you asked the question, Elizabeth. I was taking the watch apart, and then miraculously, when I put it back together, it worked. And so people, the adults would say, how did you do that? From this perspective, it was probably quite by accident. It was probably dirty, and taking it apart and cleaning it and putting it back together worked. It wasn't that I really knew what I was doing, but it is fascinating that I have had this interest for so long in my life. And when I was in high school, or just starting high school, I was looking for extra jobs to work around the holidays of school and so on and so forth. And I came up with a slogan when I was applying for jobs, my FEB, that if I could help by helping you get the work done faster or easier or better, then I think that I would prove myself beneficial to your company. And it turns out that the FEB is still a very big part of my MO. I'm always interested to see if I can do something more efficiently, faster, or easier on the body as a therapist, easier on the body as a runner, et cetera, and also better for the person doing it, better for the teacher, et cetera, et cetera. So I started with dance. I went all the way through to get my bachelor's and my master's at UCLA. And then I got a secondary teaching credential and taught at Long Beach Community College for 9 years. And my job was to design movement programs for the athletic department, the theater department, and some events for the music department. And I was always creating new programs. about the same time, 1965, I was invited to become the movement lady at one of the growth centers, a retreat center in La Jolla. And also they had classes at Esalen in Big Sur. And the people that would come and lead would be like Fritz Perls and Alan Watts and all of these leaders. And they wanted someone to work with their participants on the weekend. So I was designing programs for them. So this is something evidently that's been with me a long time. And then in 1966, 67, I had actually 2 car accidents that left me quite compromised. And I remember talking with the psychiatrist that led many of the programs at this center. I said, one of the doctors says that this pain and my inconvenienced body is all in my mind, that it has nothing to do with the physiology or the anatomy of my body, that I'm fine. You're a psychiatrist, is it all in my body? And he said, no, they just don't understand soft tissue injuries, which really surprised me, which then I found out his other profession was he was an MD as a surgeon, so he knew something about body soft tissues. He said, but I've heard of this woman, Dr. Ida Rolf. She's going to be coming to Big Sur soon. She's a white witch, and I think that you could probably get some help from her. I said, I'm on my way. And so I dashed up to Big Sur when she was arriving in April of 1968, and all of her sessions were full. And so I just sat on her doorstep thinking that perhaps she would have a cancellation. And that lasted 2 days. And she must have wondered who this strange person was. And so she asked around, who is this strange woman sitting on my doorstep all the time? The reason I know that is that when she, on the second day, told me I could have a session, at the end of that session, which was unbelievably magical, I knew that Dr. Rolf had understood the magic of the body and how you can work on it and give it a chance to change. And at the end of that session, she said, I understand you design movement programs for other people. Do you think you could design a movement program for me? And I said, sure, I'd be happy to do that. And then she said, well, I have to train you, and you have to go to massage school, and you have to, the program starts in a few weeks. And it was like, well, I had never done that before, but somehow it felt like I was supposed to, so I did. And I created and taught classes for Dr. Rolf for 9 years also. And then I discovered all these things that were making me concerned about the efficiency of the body, the ease of the body, and certain paradigms that were accepted out around the world that I wanted to truly question. And that's what led me into some of these discoveries.
Yes, Judith, have so much admiration and so much appreciation of the fact that you were, so open to collaboration, and at the same time, I'm so open to questioning what was at the time the accepted paradigms. Could you take us through an example of theory and also of movement experience so we understand what accepted paradigms were you questioning?
Yes, so let's go ahead and look at the first slide. So one of the things that I was intrigued with one day, as I was looking at the skeleton hanging from the skyhook, I had this aha. Why do we keep using this idea that we're supposed to be using the skyhook and reaching for the skyhook when actually that model, the feet never touched the ground? And it perplexed me because through dance and through posture training and so on, I too had always learned to lift up against the pull of gravity, forcing us down on the earth, and to pull up. But it created a lot of tension. And so I became curious. I wonder if there's another way to look at this. What if we're supposed to use our feet to lift our head. So then I went to look at the alignment. As you see, the alignment there of the plumb line coming down. Supposedly, we are to have it go through the ear, the shoulder, the hip joint, the knee, and the malleolus, the ankle, the lateral ankle, in a perpendicular line at 90 degrees to the earth. So I was sitting there looking at this chart and I said, that is very interesting to me, because that plumb line bisects the foot from the calcaneus to the line, the plumb line, and only partway through the front of the ankle. So it doesn't even include the whole foot. I wonder why that is. And then all the documentation, all the trainings that I knew of, and the theories were about the body's best alignment was at 90 degrees. So the question was, if it's supposed to be at 90 degrees, perhaps we were not supposed to have a forefoot. Because if we're not using it for our best alignment, why is it there? So I started playing with that, and as I was playing with it, I realized that actually, if the body simply leaned forward a couple of degrees, you had weight on the foot, the midfoot, and the forefoot. And it left the body in a more dynamic position rather than holding on at this 90-degree angle. So this is where this egg, the shell of this egg just cracked. I've been teaching this all my years of dance and all my years at the college, and oh my goodness, what's happening? I'm thinking very differently about this. So look at the next slide, and this is what it looks like if the contrast of the 90-degree coming down through the ankle or 2 degrees forward. I just put the field there because it really isn't a single line anyway. It's many lines coming through the surface area of our body that is being pushed or pulled down from gravity onto the earth.
Judith, is there a movement experience that comes with this, or is that coming along a bit later?
Yes, I'm about to do that for sure. Thank you. It's coming soon. Let's just look at the next slide. And this is a woman standing at the 0 and about 2 degrees forward. So you can just see that she's still in very good alignment, but there's something about the chest, the head, the ear, when she had her line up, and obviously this is individual, it will be different for different people, but in terms of the theory, it includes weight into the forefoot. That's what I wanted you to see. So let's move along to dimension, which is where I'll get to that exercise. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. The next slide. What happened here was I was teaching, I had the opportunity to train all the Rolfers from 70, in the classes of 71 to 77. They did a class with me before they trained on seeing the body and on body mechanics, while using their body mechanics while they were doing the work. And then I also created a movement training for people to teach movement to go along with the Rolfing series. And one day in one of the classes, one of the practitioners was standing there and the class said, wow, look at him. He's exactly perfect. His ear to his shoulder, to his hip joint, to his knee, to his ankle. I said, yes, that plumb line is exactly vertical. And I looked, and his chest was quite diminished anteriorly, almost like he had exhaled and never took an inhale. Because the volume of the chest, as we know when looking at the skeleton, the depth of the chest is deeper anteriorly than the ribs in the back. So that should actually be fuller to the front than in the back. So let's go to the next slide. So I started realizing that not just looking at alignment, but the consequence of alignment. So with this woman, we look and we can see that if we start at her weight-bearing joint, her foot, and look at the ankle. Her lower leg goes back of that line. Her thigh goes forward, and then her low back starts to go back with her chest, and then her neck goes forward and her head goes back. But that's one thing to look at the placement of the alignment of the segments, but look at how diminished some of the dimension is. Like the anterior leg, the lower leg looks less deep. It looks like the calf is pushed out to the back. The top of her chest looks as though it's not quite as full. Or the back of her neck looks as though it's being pulled forward, so the depth of the neck goes forward, and she doesn't have that space for her spine to work so well at the back of her neck. So one of the exercises and one of the ways that I developed to teach people to understand how to find their neutral, I call it Aston arcing exercise, arcing between flexion and extension, is also a way of looking at the body. Let's look at the next slide. And let's do this. Well, I will do this first, and then I'll have you join me in a moment. But what's happening here is that the body is in a flexion mode. So we're bending at the hip, we're bending at the knees, we're bending at the spine just a little bit. We're letting the head and neck relax forward, and exhalation is the pattern to do, okay? Will you do this with me, please? Just stand and start by ever so slightly hinging your trunk at your hip like you're doing a mini bow. Soften your knees, soften your back, let it curve a little bit. Let your arms hang toward the front of your thighs. Let your neck and head be soft, not letting it hang down, just let it be in line with the rest of the flexion. And exhale. Now, lean forward just a little bit so there's more weight to the front of the foot. Push the feet onto the floor. Push down, that will straighten your legs. Let the body lift by that push. Let the body go up into lengthening the front of the chest, letting the hands and arms turn out so the palms are forward with the head looking up, and inhale into extension and then settle. And now you combine those two to reset yourself anytime during the day to find your neutral. So let's do it again. Hinge at the hip, soften the knees, soften the spine, soften the bow, head and neck relaxed. Exhale, blow the air out. Stay there and do a little bit of an inhale. Exhale fully. Lean forward a bit. Bend the knees. To push down on the feet straightens the legs. Stretch the front of the body. Palms are out. Arms are slightly open. The chest is being pushed up from the feet. Inhale. Now settle where the front and back are about the same length. That is probably your best. That can be, I should say, you might have to do it many times. Might be your best neutral for now, where you reset. Because as we spend our day at the computer, writing, playing piano, as we do these activities that always keep us in flexion, we don't take the time to do the opposite and get the body into extension. And really, when you think about it, our whole spinal curve has just that. It has flexion at the neck, right? A curve in the opposite direction at the high spine, and then again another curve going forward at the lumbar spine. So we have these flexion and extension curves that we're honoring by doing this exercise of arcing. So that helps us reclaim the dimension, not just a better alignment. Okay. So,
onward, what's next?
Elizabeth, what?
Onward, what's next to build on that experience?
Okay, what I want to do is just have you look at this gentleman, the next slide. And the next one, yeah. Yes, right there. And he looks, he's an athlete. He looks strong and muscular, and you know, his posture from the front doesn't look very off. You might see that he seems to lean to the left a little bit, his left. And you might see that his hands and his arms look slightly, in terms of the silhouette, you can see his right arm is closer to his body, his left arm is further away from his body. But really, I mean, it doesn't look too obviously different, right? So if you look at me for a moment, and I take this dowel to use as my plumb line, I'm putting it right between my feet, equidistant in between my feet. And that should kind of run through the pubis, the navel, the xiphoid, etc., up to my head, right? But if I lean my body one way or the other, I'm really changing the alignment and the function of the body in terms of that compromise. So I wanted the students to see what just happened with this gentleman if I took some dental floss and put it between his feet and put it perpendicular to the floor, and just look at what happened to his right side and his left side. Next slide. His right side, if you put the two right sides together, he looks totally different. If you put the two left sides together, he looks totally different. And now all three slides together, the next slide. Look at that again. From the front one that you see on the left, you begin to see how narrow he's living in his right side and how that affects the function, the rotation he might be doing with his sports. He does all kinds of sports. I mean, from surfing and skiing and cycling and so many different sports. But isn't that fascinating to see what we look like if we put our two right sides together and our two left sides together? It would make it more obvious just how we are using our body and the consequence in terms of function. Good. Okay. So moving right along, I want to have you go to the next slide. And I want to talk a little bit about how I came to some of this. It's the upper part of that slide, if you have that. Hillary, I don't know if you have the upper part of that slide. Yes, you have, that was it, the one with the arrows. So it's back one more slide. I see, okay. So let me just demonstrate, go back to just me for a moment, please. So what happens if we have our body segments, so the head segment, the neck segment, the chest segment, and so on, the pelvis, thighs, lower legs, and feet, and we look at these balls in the body, the contours of the shapes. Gravity is pulling everything on the earth toward the center of the earth, okay? Gravity is pulling us down. And so a lot of this skyhook, I could tell, was taught to fight the pull of gravity. Like, we have to fight this gravity thing. And so if you look at this, it's like the head is being pulled down on my neck is being pulled down on my chest, and so on. If I'm in fairly good alignment, that's one thing. But if I'm off in terms of my body pattern and my alignment, then that pull that gravity's doing there, and that pull that gravity's doing there, And that pull on my head being forward that makes my neck so tight has a very larger significance in terms of the consequence of my aging and how I feel in my body and my health. So the idea is that the first slide is showing the arrows being pulled down by gravity. Second slide, and this is the opposing force that a lot of people don't know about. And I used to teach it as the push off the earth. And if you'll go to that second slide, Hillary, yeah, that's page 162. Next one. So in opposition then, this force on the ground is pushing anything on the earth toward the stars. So we've got this play going on between the earth and the stars, the down and the up. And as a dancer, any of you that have done athletics of pushing off with your Aikido, you understand about pushing off the earth. And as a dancer, you're always pushing off to jump and so on and so forth. So I called it the push off. The push off to initiate movement, the push off to stand up, the push off to do body work. It's from the feet instead of just fighting gravity. So this second force takes the arrows up. Now, if the segments, like let's just say that's the head and the neck on the bottom of that slide, if they are out of alignment, then you can see that those are going to ricochet those forces. So let's go to the next slide. And in terms of gravity, the top one being to the left, the top ball, that's going to push on the lower ball to our right, okay? But likewise, and interestingly enough, the earth is pushing back in the opposite direction. So we've got these vectors competing with each other and creating certain consequences in the body from this lower, one pushing. And then, just for a quick look, if you look at the last slide, you put this all together with this woman's posture and you draw it out, and you can really begin to see how the vectors, the forces translate through the body. So you can see why she might complain about her chest not being able to get very much breath, or her neck being very, very tight, or her low back getting pressure because her upper chest is leaning back and pushing down on her low back. And so these particular ways of looking and assessing help everything that we do. So I just want to now check in with you, Elizabeth, and see if there is anything. Should I do an exercise with that first?
That would be so marvelous. Yes, because the theory with your illustrations and your explanation is so clear, and that to be able to feel, to embody these different vectors would be fabulous.
Great. Okay. And so just this last, maybe 6 months ago, I did a class in Hawaii for a choir with 115 members. They're quite a special choir, and they're traveling around the world and performing. And I was teaching the class, and I saw these two men kind of halfway through the audience there. And I would say something about the concept of ground reaction, and they would go like this and hit each other and look at each other and kind of smile, right? And so at the end, they came running up to me and they said, "We are engineers, and we are so thankful that you taught this to our group, because we know that the only thing that holds buildings up is truly the ground reaction force." And I said, "All right, yay," when we high-fived and all of that. And so, but it was so cute. I thought, gee, these guys are having a fight or something, and they're going to argue with each other and so on and so forth. So anyway, it turned out to be all right. But gravity, when we're in alignment like this dowel, it's only this much force directly to the center of this dowel. But if I hold this dowel across the field, even my holding this dowel is a very different story. It seems like it gained quite a bit of weight, and I have to effort to hold it versus here, okay? So what happens is that if we are only using gravity as a reference for movement or stillness even, then we're losing out on the benefit of ground reaction. So now, facing me, would you just go ahead and just in a relaxed way, but still lift your left arm up and down. And your right. And now, move your center of gravity to your left foot. Push down on the ground to engage the ground reaction force. Push down, now lift the arm. And go back, don't lean and don't push down, and raise your arm and feel what happens. It doesn't feel as connected to the body. Can you feel that? Let's do the other side. So just move it, or move your center of gravity to your right, push down and lift it, and so on. So this idea that we use and we take advantage of how ground reaction, or I fondly call it GRF, or girfing, because you use it to do the body work. You do your yoga by pushing off. And many people do, but they don't necessarily understand how you can keep recycling the ground reaction on up the body instead of just using the contact point with the earth. So I just wanted you to feel that.
Yes. Judith, at this moment, would you speak a little bit to how Aston Kinetics it interrelates or relates with manual therapy and with palpation? Because I noted in your book that that's an aspect of Aston Kinetics, is the palpation. And in order for ground reaction forces to travel through the structure, then they need to be able to have easy passage. So how do you facilitate that?
Yes, well, one of the things that happened for me, and again, always trying to figure out easier ways, better ways, or faster ways to get something done. Dr. Rolf wasn't going to take me because I only weighed 110 pounds. I gained 10 just for the training. The piece there was she knew how hard the work could be on the person doing it if they didn't really have the strength and so on and so forth. So I was always trying to figure out ways of being able to use the body mechanics to really optimize my size, my weight, my strength, and so on. And as I was then leaning into a body, I started to really feel, I can feel that quad is so tight on the left and not the same tightness is on the right. I can feel that the movement across the shin is much tighter. And now this may coincide with the person saying, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, I broke my left leg. You know how that happens. And we all do it, we forget to tell people. And so it could be that that's going to start to influence where I start my work based on what's going on in the body pattern. So I created a whole system of making palpation and shading the body to really see the overall pattern in relationship to the symptoms, in relationship to the history, and in relationship to the visuals of what you see. So you would notate the body pattern as you have in this book, the guide for, and then you would also notate the holding patterns in the body, and you start to create a session that takes them to their next available place.
Yes, thank you.
I
think we're onward now to different holding patterns and their effects on gait.
Yes, and so again, I think we all have these aha moments, and I just laugh because it really is like the egg cracking. You just have this belief for so long, and then something happens and you go, why am I doing it that way? Because it's effortful. Why are all my clients reaching out with their foot to walk? Why? Da, 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 da. So just now at home, if you'll do this quick little thing, stand up and take a few steps. Let's see, I can do, I think, 3 or 4. Just take a few steps and feel what part of your foot touches first.
Oh, Judith, I think that, there we go. For a moment, your camera was blurry, but now it's found you again. No problem.
Thank you. I saw that.
Right.
Well, just do that pre-test. Just quickly take a few steps forward and back. And now, let's just do that same exercise, that standing arcing that we did. So go ahead and allow your body to flex at the hip joint, soften the knees, go ahead and curve the spine, or allow it to curve the neck and the head. Let the hands just hang with the arms in front of you, and exhale. Stay there to inhale. Exhale again, push all the dead air out. Lean forward a little bit, bend the knees, push both feet strongly and a little bit quickly down into the ground. Come on up, inhale, arms up, open, and settle where you land on the whole foot. And now, instead of reaching out with the foot, simply rock your whole body across the ankle hinge, lean forward, and step. Lean forward and walk. And contrast that by picking up a foot and reaching out and walking, and feel the difference of those two ideas.
Judith, given that that movement patterns, movement habits, movement strategies are practiced with every step we take, how do you, in Aston Kinetics, how do you teach or frame or inspire practice in order for this mindfulness to make a difference in our lives?
Well, once I came up with this biomechanical model, I started designing products because so much of what's in our environment, in our chairs, in our car seats, in our airplane seats, it creates such a slouch on the body that while it may seem like a comfortable place, it often puts the body into extreme flexion. So do one more thing with me, if you would. Will you sit back on your chair right now? So you're sitting on your thighs mainly. And will you turn your head to the right and left and see what your range is? Now, do nothing else other than scoot forward so you're only sitting on your pelvis, not the back of your legs. Turn your head right and left and move your hands. And now keep moving your fingers like you're playing piano or computer. Keep moving them while you sit back on your thighs and relax into the back of the seat. Suddenly you aged, did you not? The reason being that the pelvis isn't supporting the trunk, the thighs are, and the body collapses. So I just squeezed all of my joints. So in the work, we try to train people to learn how to use these concepts so they can quickly neutralize themselves, but how to modify the airplane seat, or how to use one of our products to modify the car seat, or use a towel in a pinch, how to support themselves so that they're not with the entropy that's expected of a person aging, but that they keep neutralizing and at least keeping themselves to their available optimum.
Yes. One of the participants, I think, just actually effortlessly answered my question to you. She says, wow, I'm walking and I can immediately see the effortlessness that came in. So maybe just the instant proprioceptive feedback is a good reminder.
Yeah, I don't know, do we have another couple of minutes, maybe one? Just this one story, Elizabeth. I was working with, a friend of mine had a baby, and he was 3 months at the time. And I asked if I could come and meet him. And so I drove down to Santa Cruz and so on. Anyway, and I said, I'm bringing lunch so we can visit. And she said, I'll watch you eat. And I said, I'm sorry, what is the problem here? She said, no, I can't put the baby in the infant seat that you thought I could. No, he screams. And I said, oh, okay. So anyway, I went down, and so she's holding the baby. I'm putting the lunch out. and I said, do you mind if I see what happens when you put him in the, she gave me stink eye, and she put him in the infant seat. And really, his bottom hit the seat, and his back hit the back, and he started screaming, okay? So I asked her to take him out, and I modified his seat with a little diaper there and a little diaper there and so on and so forth. I did a little of that exercise, that arcing exercise with him. And then I set him down where his pelvis went there and his chest went there. And Elizabeth, this is what he did. He went, and the mother is going, what? I said, see, the baby recognizes it's neutral. He's comfortable. He's not being strangled with 4 double chins. I always thought babies had 3 or 4 double chins or something. And it's like, it's the position of what the environment puts them in, including us. So.
It's a wonder that more adults in pre-pandemic days, it's a wonder that more adults didn't scream out loud when they were subjected to airplane seats. But
Yes.
they were needing your products.
Yeah,
Right.
if I'm traveling alone and I take my wedges and so on and so forth, and there's someone there and I say, excuse me, just give me a moment. And I put the back in and the seat in and the lumbar support and the cushion, and I sit down. And this happened all the way back from New Zealand. My husband and I were sitting in these two, and this man is sitting there and he goes, I've got to get some of those wedges because we're landing in LA and I have to fly to Germany. I said, I almost gave him mine, but I just didn't.
Although very few of us are in airplane seats now, the vast majority of us are in seats at home, or seats that are in order for we can see our screens, our computer screens. Yes. You mentioned in our previous discussion that you transferred your work to online teaching, the ability to see and coach and give online sessions years ago. And now that so many of us are trying to catch up with you, would you give some tips, some hints on how Aston Kinetics translates into work on screens?
Yes. It started at least 5 years ago when a client was either injured and unable to come for a session, or they just lived somewhere else or in Europe or something. So I started doing online sessions then, and just smoothly moved into the increase through this pandemic. But it is pretty much the same in the sense of an intake form with their history, their interests, and then looking at the person and what they want to do. Like sometimes I'm working with someone who wants to optimize their body for their singing voice in the choir, or sometimes it's like, by the end of the day at the office work, I'm just, everything is excruciatingly painful. And so it's a matter of assessment first, and then selecting or creating movement designs for them to get to those areas, how to work them themselves. but also how to modify maybe their situation, and sometimes modify their shoes because the shoe has a negative heel and it keeps them in a hole, and so on and so forth. All these things that, that occurred to me, that I now train others to train others, because they seem so incidental, but they're so consequential. So we do these sessions online, and in fact, now I've already started doing some classes online for therapists to train with us. So we're doing 2 of our prerequisite classes online soon, actually, June and July and August.
Yes. And Judith, given that you've collaborated, we're working in collaboration with Dr. Ida Rolf for, as you mentioned, for 9 years, and continue to provide movement coaching in Aston Kinetics to so many different professionals, physical therapists, athletic trainers, coaches, movement educators. Do you have some insight into the directions you think that our field is going in, the field for manual therapy and movement educators?
You know, Dr. Juana de Laban was the chairperson for one of the 3 people for my master's thesis at UCLA. And she knew a lot about connective tissue massage in Europe at the time, and that Dr. Rolf was there. So she thought perhaps Dr. Rolf had been exposed to it. And what happens when someone gets an idea like that, where it really became a model for her in terms of what she created and what she put together and how she did it, and it worked. And it has, I wouldn't be in the bodywork field if Dr. Rolf hadn't asked me to do that training, create a training for her. But what happened then is that as I went through the years, I was able to find ways to create slack in the body to get deeply quickly without compressing layer for layer for layer for layer to get to that number 6 layer. I could create slack by the way I used my own body, by the way I held the tissue, by the way I had the client move. And so I started teaching those techniques, and that's where people said, oh, you've created soft rolfing and you're not going to be able to get the layer. But actually, there are ways to get the layer without the compression. And so a lot of therapists, I've trained a lot of physical therapists, occupational therapists, a few MDs, but there's just usually always a way to keep playing with it. It's like when we have an injury and we go, I'm never going to walk again the way I used to. Not necessarily. You may end up being able to actually improve beyond where you were when you had that accident, because your body was compromised at that time in your life also. So by really caring and finding these therapists that know how to listen, to observe, and to feel and palpate the body and be creative in the problem solving, we're on our way.
Yes. You know, I have so many questions for you. So one could say that I've been dominating the question, Mike. But just to remind the participants on this webinar that the Q&A box is open and I'm looking at it. So when you have a question for Judith, just here we go. Fantastic. Here's one. Hi, thank you, Judith. Are therapists able to train online with you in the UK?
Yes. Well, yes. Yes. And as we know just from this webinar, we started at 7 this morning or 8 this morning, and you were already in the UK at 4. So we've been doing classes online from 10 to 5. And I understand that that's going to be way into the wee hours. So I'm not quite sure how to do that. It may be that because I'm not the only faculty, it could be that we create 2 half days or something out of one. Many of the classes are just 2 days online, but 10 hours, 12 hours. We might have to make that over 4 days. Right now, I'm working with a group in Shanghai, and I have to go till 10 o'clock at night for them to be able to start at 9 in the morning. So, you know, it's doable. But Elizabeth, I have not fallen asleep once.
Well, no, movement is a great motivator. So the questioner, Anita Appleyard, says, would be very interested if the logistics can be organized. Thank you.
Great, great. I have to say what a pleasure it is and has been following your career and all that you have done, and to reconnect with you after all these years this way through Handspring is just a delight. Congratulations on what you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Judith. It is one of the silver linings in my shelter-in-place in Mill Valley days. Yes, yeah. Right. Yeah. And we have someone in the chat saying, could you please share on where we can get more information on the upcoming trainings? And then Handspring has answered with the website for Aston Kinetics.
Yes.
Right.
That's the best place.
I think we have a slide that gives information on the discount for your book.
Oh, thank you.
And we also have the same slide explains your contact details and how to get in touch with you in order to ask for training information. So here's Hillary sharing the slide now, noting that there's a 25% discount on Judith's, the second edition of Judith's book, New Paradigm for Evaluating Body Patterns. And then her contact information, the website, the Facebook, and the Twitter. Judith, before we say goodbye, but we've agreed, you and I have agreed that we will get together and will not let 25 years elapse, time elapse, despite the fact that movement keeps you exquisitely young. Yeah. But do you have closing comments and closing remarks before we announce the next guest for the next webinar?
Well, you know, I thank all of you for your interest and participating, and I thank Handspring so much for the way this book was put together and how it can serve people in their different fields. I'm so pleased. So, mahalo.
Super, most excellent. So, Hillary, may we have the next slide? See you soon, Judith. Thank you. Bye. Bye. Yes. And a reminder that the next Move to Learn webinar of Handspring series will be coming up on Wednesday, June 24th, and it's featuring Till Lukow. And Till and Judith asked to give their best to each other since they know each other from their days working and teaching and learning in the Rolf Institute. And you can see, I think, Till's books in the background there, another 2 gorgeous books from Handspring. So thank you, Judith. Thank you, everyone. Wishing you well and looking to the next time that we're together. Great. Bye now.
Bye.